Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nugget on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to another impactful episode of I Am Dad Podcast. Today we are honored to have with us a truly remarkable guest, Dr. Robin L. Smith, a #1 best-selling author, sought-after speaker, experienced media personality, and ordained minister who has touched countless lives with her fearless truth-telling and healing wisdom. Many of you may recognize Dr. Robin from her years as an on-air therapist for the Oprah Winfrey Show, where she captivated audiences around the world with her insightful and compassionate approach to life's challenges. Today, she continues to make a profound impact through her work with major corporations, not-for-profit organizations, and high-profile individuals, helping them overcome adversity and achieve personal and professional breakthroughs. Dr. Robin is the author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, Lies at the Altar, The Truth About Great Marriages, as well as her soulful memoir, Hungry, The Truth About Being Full, and Inspirational Vitamins, A Guide to Personal Empowerment. Now, those are two books, Hungry, The Truth About Being Full, and Inspirational Vitamins, A Truth to Personal Empowerment. Her latest book, The Invisible 8, Black Men Identifying Their Pain and Reclaiming Their Power, co-written with the talented Courtney B. Vance, was published in November 23 and has already sparked vital conversations around mental health and empowerment within the Black community. With a PhD in counseling psychology from Temple University and her master's degree from Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary, Dr. Robin brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to her work. But beyond her impressive credentials, it is her genuine compassion, wisdom, and commitment to truth that make her such a powerful and inspiring voice. Today, we are thrilled to explore Dr. Robin's insights on fatherhood, mental health, and the transformative power of reclaiming one's true self. Join me in welcoming the extraordinary Dr. Robin L. Smith. How are you today?
Oh, I'm grateful to be here with you. I know it took us a minute or so to allow this moment to happen. I'm grateful. This is a meant to be moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Timing is everything. I'm about God. I don't
Yeah.
rush. I don't pull. I don't go crazy. It's like when it happens, I know that God's hand is all in it for the
Absolutely.
purpose that He has designed long before you and I got to this space.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So I
And
celebrate that with you.
and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
Dr. Smith, we start our show off in a very unique way. It helps give our audience a sense of balance and thought about who they're listening to. And it's a very simple question, but can be a complex question. You can answer this question and frame it however you want to frame it, from whatever perspective you want to answer the question is. And the question is, tell us your daddy story.
Oh, I love the question, and I love my daddy. Um, my father he died 34 years ago. Dr. Warren Edward Smith. He was a internist here in Philadelphia, and then became a psychiatrist, which is interesting because after 10 years, I wasn't born. My siblings are 11 years older. They're twins. And what my father learned is that his medical patients that were coming in talking about what was wrong were really talking about what was hurting their hearts, what was hurting their minds, what was harming their relationships. And so he, as an older student, went back to school and did a residency in psychiatry. Again, I was not born then, so that he could serve the minds and hearts, particularly of Black people. But what I will say about him, not as the professional, but as my father, he was a gentle giant. He is the person who really ushered me and blessed me and bathed me in what it means to be fully human. He had a beautiful integration of kindness and softness, and he was a warrior for justice, a real warrior for justice and for civil rights. He marched with Dr. King and with local and national figures. I was known as the picket line baby because I was so young. I was riding on his shoulders. And so he taught me about vulnerability being powerful, not just in a woman, but in a man. He taught me, and I watched he and my brother have a loving, intimate, affectionate relationship, both being 6'4" in terms of height, but they kissed each other. They wept when they needed to. And so my daddy's story is how much he shepherded and parented the wholeness, and I mean my holes, which we'll talk about, my HOLES, as well as my longing to be whole, WHOLE, which is a holy, HOLY journey. So my daddy's story, I long for him still, 34 years later. I miss him, and he abides in and with me.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. There was so much in that that could lead to a whole nother podcast. It actually leads right into the next question, which I believe you've already answered it, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. And typically the second part of that first question is about inspiration, because many of my guests that come on, often for me, people will ask me the question, how did you get into the fatherhood work? They're looking for a roadmap through academics in terms of how I got here. And when I answer that question, I always say life.
Yeah.
Life got me here. Academics didn't get me here in the sense of book academics, but God had a school for me to go through that equipped me to be where I am today. And it was all the academics I needed.
Yeah.
I needed some other stuff for some other things, obviously,
Yeah.
for support of that calling, right? But when you think about your work, do you look at your career as being spiritually led and guided, or were there some things in there that you sought out and said, I need to do X, Y, and Z?
Much more the first. It's not that I didn't do, as you just shared about your own journey, X, Y, and Z, but there was a divine plan, I'm certain, for my life. And, watching my father as a healer and unafraid of pain made pain something that was approachable to me, both personally and professionally. My mother was a psychiatric social worker, so I had, this model of Black parents who were touching the untouchable, those feelings that we're so afraid of. And so I watched that. I think the other role modeling, I was just saying to my agent and my manager that there's a young tape of me, and I'm maybe 5, and I'm pretending to be, it's a cassette tape, so that dates me. Um, and I'm pretending to be a DJ. And as you introduced, I spent a lot of time on TV and radio, but here I was a young child, and the name of my radio station was WGOD. But on God, on WGOD, I played James Brown and the Fisk Jubilee Singers. My sister went to Fisk. Again, my siblings are much older. I played the Rolling Stones. I played some of everyone. And the reason I talk about, the role modeling is I watched my parents, but particularly because we're talking about Black dads, I watched my father being big and inclusive and unafraid, not only of emotions, but also of difference. He was curious about difference. And so the role modeling was certainly set up in a spiritual way for me. There was no other path. I mean, I thought about doing lots of things, becoming a pediatric surgeon and all kinds of things, but there was no question when I went to seminary, which was not my plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up literally, I had shorts on and my hair was pulled back, and I was driving down the street and I made a U-turn in the middle of the street and went to Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary to ask a question. And 6 weeks later, I was enrolled in seminary. So there has been an absolute direction. And I just needed to keep my heart and ears and eyes open for a plan that was much, much greater than me.
Mm. When you think about your mom, what strengths did she show you that allowed her to be not only a strong woman for herself, but a strong support for him? And
Hmm.
how do you believe that impacted your father?
It's a beautiful question. It's interesting. Something else, my father went to seminary before he went to medical school, so I did follow very much in his footsteps. But he had, my mother and father talked about this. He had these dreams. He came from a family where his mother became blind. His father died when his first week in medical school. His mother was a domestic, my grandmother, on my father's side, and they didn't have a lot. And he was so committed to wanting to contribute, particularly to Black people, but did not know how that would all happen. And so he went to Lincoln University initially and graduated from there, then went into the service, and then came back and went to LaSalle College, which is now LaSalle University. But I mention that because my mother was, she was his cheerleader.
Mm.
She was the person who, whatever he said he wanted to do or he felt he was called to do, she was saying, well, then we'll do it. Not, well, how are we going to do it and how are we going to afford it? But we'll do it. And so she played a foundational role, which I watched as I was, born again after my siblings. But I also, as a woman myself with a partner, Black man, it was the model for me that a Black woman stand not only by, but with, and sometimes for
Hmm.
her partner. And so she shaped how I understood Black love. And so did my father, but particularly with your question, it was a beautiful way. My mother was bright and smart, and had her own dreams, but she was always seeding in to daddy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that you wrote a book about marriage, and again, we could go several different ways in this conversation, but we're going to get to the invisible ache. I'm often, curious about when people ask, like, what's the secret sauce to your marriage?
Yeah.
And we go about communication, trust, like we do these kind of high level things, right? And for me, I'm much more introspective and deep than that. I'm always trying to figure out what's at the depth, of success.
Yeah.
And I think connection in marriages is an
Absolutely.
underrated characteristic of a relationship.
Absolutely. Connection, and I will say this, lies at the altar. The first sentence in Lies at the Altar, The Truth About Great Marriages, and I'm divorced, so that you know,
Mhm.
that book was written a long time ago. But the first line says, I know what it's like to live a lie. I didn't say my patients know what it's like to live a lie. I didn't
Mhm.
say that my cousins or family, I said, I know what it's like to live a lie. And so I would say the other foundation, as you said, is connection, but the other one is truth. Whether or not
Mhm.
we are willing to be in an intimate relationship with what is true about us, what is true about me, what is true about the people who we are partnering with. So often we're looking for someone else to make us whole. And I look at, women, all women, but I mean, or many women, and certainly Black women who are hungry, rightfully so, for connection, as you just said, but are not necessarily looking at what they may be doing or not doing that gets in the way of the connection that they're longing for. And so self knowledge is so important to know, like, again, where are my holes, my HOLES? All God's children have holes. And so it's like, oh, I don't have holes. It's like, well, if you're human, you got holes. And
Right.
maybe the journey around partnership and longevity in marriage and love is, am I aware of what my holes are? Am I caring for my holes? Or have I brought my holes to you expecting that you're going to make it all better when that's my work? That's what I've been called, to take my own holes and be kind to them and curious about them and courageous as I begin to address them. So I think connection, but also underneath connection, is how truthful am I willing to be, able to be about what holes I bring and what holes my partner brings, and can we be kind, to each other around our holes, honest
Hmm.
and kind.
Right. Yeah, and that, kind of takes us right into the back door of the
Yeah,
conversation around Black men and mental health, and more specifically, this whole notion of vulnerability, right? Because that's what you're talking about. Your truth
absolutely.
demands vulnerability, right? Because when you lie, that's what you're trying to protect. You're trying to protect a image of you that you don't want people to see. And so
Yes,
vulnerability has to be key in connectivity if you want true connectivity, right? And so,
yes.
and that then becomes, in general, the issue of men, right? Because I'm sure
Hmm.
for your dad, and I was going to ask you this question, how did he show his vulnerability? How did you recognize his vulnerability? And did he show it?
Yeah, it's interesting. His brother, who I did not know, again, I was a late baby to my parents. So, but his brother was murdered. And it's said that he was murdered by the mafia for numbers, being involved with running numbers. And see, again, if I just say my uncle, my father's brother was murdered, but I
Right,
don't tell more, am I
right.
ashamed? Do I want you to think, oh, my father was a physician and so was his brother? It's like, well, that wasn't their story. He was an
Right.
incredible man, I'm told, my uncle, and he lived a very different life. And he, was murdered, beat to death. But I say that because my mother talks about what that did to my father, how that, of course, broke his heart, and how he shared it and showed it. And so, one of the ways I can say that once I was born and got to know my father, that he showed his vulnerability was to talk about his feelings, the feelings that were not so manicured and not so airbrushed. I also know that he was protective, of some of his feelings because they were so raw, like the death of his brother. So he talked about it and talked about that part of my parents deciding to have a third child, again, my siblings are twins, was when his brother was murdered and my father was left alone. Even though he was an adult, he didn't want my siblings who were twins. I mean, at some point, we're all left alone or we leave someone alone, but he didn't want there just to be two children because of his own heartbreak. So there was a way in which he was willing to talk about and share. He also could cry. One of the things that I was, in terms of my father being able to cry, and witnessing, again, this 6'4", very outwardly successful man weep when his mother died. I remember I, was 9. And I remember standing outside of the church as we were pulling up to the church in the car, and my father crying. And so having and witnessing his vulnerability, and that he taught my brother that my brother could cry. He taught all of us that tears, and I say this in the Invisible Eight, that tears are our birthright. They are our divine birthright. And so whoever it is that has told a man that to be a man, that men don't cry and boys don't cry, has actually assaulted our divine birthright to cry. I mean, tears are our teacher. They tell us when we are sad or when we are, joyful. I think of, when little boys fall down and little girls fall down. When little girls fall down, we pick them up, we kiss their boo-boo, we ask, what color Band-Aid do you want? And then a little boy falls, and we often say, get up, you get up, and don't you cry, don't you. And so what are we saying when we are telling a little boy, when you hurt, swallow it. When you hurt,
Right.
cover it up. When you hurt, lie about it. And so my father showed me from his own living and his own suffering and his own joy that being vulnerable when loss happened or fearful things happened or betrayals happened, that he had the right to hurt. And he had the right, as I say in the Invisible Eight, to heal. I mean, Black men have the right to hurt, and they have the right to heal.
Yeah, when I saw that, I'm an Audible person, so I listen to the book. I'm reading. For some reason puts me to sleep, but I can
I
listen
hear
to a
you.
book all day long. But when I got to the
Yeah.
tear part, two things. One, my autobiography, my very first book that I wrote, the title of it is called When the Tear Won't Fall. And I talk about in the book how when I used to speak, when I used to talk about the subject matter around fatherhood, and because it was painful, because I hadn't resolved my own daddy issues while I was actually beginning to do this work. I've since done that a long time ago. But I used to pray to God to take my tears away. I used to tell him, God, take my tears away. And the reason that I used to pray that is because when I would speak and I would hit that soft spot in my heart about whatever I was speaking about, I would begin to cry. And I thought that that was a distraction between me and my message, that I couldn't get people to understand what I was talking about because I was breaking down on stage, like literally, having a conversation. And one night after me speaking somewhere, I prayed that prayer again to God, like, please, remove these tears from my eyes, so that I can be more effective in my talking. And this is what he said to me. He said, when you're talking, it's me talking through you. When you're crying, it's me talking to you. So if I'm talking, if you are crying, know that you are right where you're supposed to be, because it's me validating
Yeah.
what you're saying right now. And the
That's beautiful.
feeling of that.
That's
And
beautiful.
so thank you for talking about tears, because we need to talk about tears because they're so instrumental in this entire conversation, right? And so, given that and the vulnerability,
And can I,
we
I
get
just,
to.
can I just want to, no, I just wanted to say something. Thank you for sharing what you just shared, because it is when the sacred, it is when God, it is when the divine is so close, and communicating. And so when we shut that down, then we are shutting down, as you were saying about, partnerships and marriages, we're shutting down the connection. And so I love what you were saying. I also have this theory that a lot of the gun violence is also because Black men and Black boys have been denied their right to cry. And I wonder how I'm not saying gun violence would go away, but I am saying there is something about not having room to mourn and grieve
Mm.
that can have someone arm themselves with guns and drugs and sex and a lot of other things to distract them from what you just said, which is that tenderness between
Mm.
God and you, meaning the individual. And so I just love that you are also inviting all of us, but particularly Black boys and men, to let the tears come.
Yeah, no, now I don't have a problem with them. I let them flow when they flow, because when they
Oh yeah.
flow, that's messaging to me when it's not messaging to anyone else. And so,
Yes.
yeah, a good friend of mine, Lisa Good, who runs an organization in New York called Urban Grief. I was interviewing her some months ago, and she was talking about mourning and grieving because she does a lot of work with gun violence and death in the community. And she said something I had never heard before, and I was like, wow, that makes sense. And she said that there's a difference between mourning and grieving. She was like, mourning is the act of recognizing your loss. Grieving is the act of getting through your loss. And so while many of us mourn, a lot of us never grieve. And I was like,
And
whoa.
getting through,
I'm like, all right,
yeah,
Dr.
getting
Good.
through, doesn't mean that we're over it. It just means,
Right.
yeah, and it doesn't mean we're
Right.
over it, grieving. It means we're integrating it. That we're integrating.
Mm-hmm.
I think when people say I'm
Mm-hmm.
over something, and I'm thinking, or even when someone says I've been delivered from something, and I'm thinking, well, you mean for this breath, for this moment, because
You're right.
I mean, we don't know what's going to show up in the next breath and the next moment. I've forgiven someone. I'm like, okay, that's great for this moment, because I don't know what's going to get
Right.
stirred up in me in the next moment. So I
Mm-hmm.
love the invitation that we integrate our grief, we integrate our heartache and heartbreak, and make room for all of who we are.
Right. Absolutely. So the book is the book, but I am more interested in the
Yeah.
conversation that took place before the book, before a word was written, because there had to be
Yes.
a comfortable vulnerability between Courtney and you, and him sharing his issues, his things, his
Yes.
reality. And then you convincing him, and maybe not having to convince him, that this story is a healing factor and it needs to be told. Talk to me a little bit about that process with
Yeah,
him.
that's a great question. We came together, we were brought together by Courtney's publicist, Gilda Squire, who I had just gotten connected with. And Courtney came to her and said, I have to do something. His father had died, it's now 34 years ago in 1990, from suicide. And his godson in 2020, so 2020, 23 years young, was a vibrant, loved young man, and his godson also died by suicide. And so Courtney reached out to Gilda and said, look, this is my father and my godson. Like, I have to do something. I don't know what to do, but I have to do something. And so she knew me and brought us together to see whether or not there was connection, to use your word, whether or not there was synergy between Courtney and me. And so we came together and had our first conversation, and we have never stopped talking since. And what I mean by that is we sniffed each other out, and he in particular me, because this was his story of his dad's suicide, and his godson's suicide, but also the profound suffering and shaping that happened to him, and what that journey had been like. And once we created a sense of trust and safety, which again happened very quickly and has only deepened over these 4 years, it was really a no-brainer that we would come together and write the book. Now, the thing is, what we did is, and we imagined if someone were to follow us, if he and I were walking down a road, kind of arm in arm, brother and sister, talking. And that's really what we hoped to create in the Invisible Ache, with the Invisible Ache, is that people would overhear the conversations that he and I were having with each other, and most importantly, begin to have their own conversation with themselves.
The
With the
title
people in
is,
their life.
yeah, the title in and of itself is just profound. Like there's so much in that title, like you don't even have to, but how did that title come? The Invisible Ache. That's a whole, anthology of books and articles and all just in and of itself. Who came up with that?
Well, that was mostly me. And because I have known and understood that invisibility, I consider to be soul murder. I think that's how we murder the soul, by not seeing people, by not seeing their pain, by not seeing what has happened. And so, and it hurts so badly. And it becomes like a story that we haven't been able to tell. We've been ashamed. When people are followed, Black men in particular and boys in a store, simply because of their gender and their skin color. Often, Black boys and men are like, I don't care, I'm used to it, I'm good. And so, because there's something, unfortunately, that can feel shameful to be treated as less than human, to be seen as less than human. And so, this concept of being invisible for your wholeness and very visible to be blamed and shamed and targeted. So there is this dance between both invisibility and being hyper visible by a society and culture that has pathologized Black men. And when we think about also, in slavery and after slavery, where Black people were said to be only 3/5 human. Well, even though that's not true, that's in the psyche of not only white people, but it's also in the psyche of Black people, that somehow I'm not fully, wholly human. And so what the Invisible Ache really is, it's an invitation to reclaim, and what I say, to reclaim not just all of who you are, but like an altar call, not where we are calling all people to accept God, but we are calling all people and all Black men and boys and those who love them, inviting you to the floor of your own life, to pick up the fragments and the pieces and the broken parts that were left behind, that this is now your right to come and gather your whole self.
Yeah, the term invisible, was a little more micro for me, because it spoke more to the ache in and of itself, which is
Yes.
um, invisible is not a one way mirror. When it's invisible, it's invisible. You can't see it, and no one who's looking at it can see it. And then the
Mm-hmm.
society creates an environment where we're told that I know you have an ache, but I need you to make it invisible. And we buy into that, and that becomes part of our makeup. Our makeup as men is that it is now my duty to make my ache invisible because no one can see it
Yes.
at all. And it's very
Yes.
interesting that you use that title because it just spoke that deeply to me, which is in my own life. What aches do I hold of myself that it is me who are making those aches invisible and not that the ache is invisible. And so
Yeah.
wow. And I think
Yeah.
that in the book, like what I just said is said without being said. But it's this
Mm-hmm.
thing that I want men to understand about that particular ache, that there is a factor that makes it societally invisible. But we also have to
Absolutely.
own up to how we self-perpetuate the fact that it's invisible,
Yes.
that it's invisible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that is, it needs to be said again and again that not only, as you said, is this going on outside of me, but I now have colluded with the lie, and now I can't
Mhm.
see me. There's
Mhm.
a African proverb that I use in the book that says the lion's story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. And so we hear that, and people think, oh, the hunter is the one outside of me. It's society, it's racism, it's sexism, and that's a part of the lion. But you are pointing to something else. And the invisible ache in the book, we talk about something else, which is I sometimes become my own hunter.
Right.
I can begin. So it's not only that society might be hunting me, but where is it that I'm now participating without maybe knowing it, but I'm
Mhm.
participating in my invisibility. I'm participating in my silence. I'm participating in being marginalized. And so
Mhm.
that's why I said it's an altar call. It is calling
Mhm.
you to come to your whole self. Come get yourself. Come pick yourself up. Come claim all of you, holes, HOLES, longing to be whole,
Mhm.
WHOLE, which is a holy, an HOLY
Mhm.
journey. Yeah.
Mhm. How do we get there? Because that's the question that most men have, which is I hear you, Dr. Smith, and I get it, I understand, but on a day to day basis, I don't know how to do that. Like, how do I change my entire
Yeah.
historical perspective that I've been bred to understand and make a part of my psyche and being? And now you're telling me I have to do something else. What does that look like for me?
Yeah. Yeah. No. And right. So what do I do and where do you start? That's really like, where do I start? So there's a quote that I use that says, starve the lie and feed the truth.
Mm,
Starve the lie and feed the truth. So, where we start is by identifying what we are living that is untrue. Not everything, not dismantling our whole lives, because that's overwhelming. None of us can survive that all in one glance. But to decide that you are worthy, and this really is step one, that you are worthy of more. And the question I ask, and Courtney and I talk a lot about, is to ask yourself this question: Where does it hurt? Now, hear my question. I don't ask, does it hurt? Because I already know that. You may not know it. But if we ask ourselves, not do I hurt, but where do I hurt? It begins to lead us in the direction of normalizing, as a human being and a Black man in America, there's no way that I couldn't have been impacted, that I couldn't be hurt and hurting. And so the question of where does it hurt? Again, not do I hurt, but where do I ache? Is the place to really start by asking, what is it about my life? And where, and when I said starve the lie and feed the truth, where is it that I've learned to smile when I hurt? Where is it that I've learned to say, you know, when in the Christian church where people will say, how are you? And people say, I'm blessed and highly favored. And I think, well, okay, when that's true, but where is it that we've been taught to say, I'm blessed because I'm here, but my life is a mess. Like I'm a mess. I'm a mess, like right now. And so if I can begin to invite myself to starve what is untrue, what is untrue, that I'm always good, like I'm good, I got this. It's like, you don't always have this. None of us always have this. And so the starting place is around the truth. And the question is where do I hurt? And who hurt me? Because see, that's another thing where Black men can be ultra protective of their families, of their mothers, even if their mothers hurt them. And I mean emotionally hurt them, or hurt them by hurting their fathers, and not recognizing that you can't hurt somebody's father, a boy's father, and not hurt him.
Right.
You can't, right. You can't do, I mean, it doesn't work that way. That's not how this thing works. And so can women also who are parenting boys or living with someone, can women also begin to check themselves about how they are articulating their own feelings? Courtney and I were doing an interview with a woman, we didn't know this, and a journalist, and I told the story that I shared with you, that when little girls fall, we pick them up and kiss them, and the boys fall, we tell them to get up and stop that crying. And if you don't stop that crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And she said to me, oh, I feel like I'm hurting my child. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, I have a young boy and I think he's too emotional. And she said, what you're really talking about is I'm so afraid that if he's not hard, this world is going to destroy him.
Right.
And I said, well, don't hate yourself. You don't need to hate yourself but check yourself. The fact that you could hear what I'm saying and recognize that you are cutting off part of your son's humanity, but you didn't know it. So all of us have done something that harmed someone. So this is the question is, where do I hurt? Who hurt me? We don't have to hate who hurt us. We just have to know it. We don't have to, turn against our parents, our mothers, our fathers, but we do have to know that mom or pop or mom or dad, we do have to know that we are injured, and we have to know that we weren't born to stay broken.
Wow. That's a mouthful right there. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I some years ago, 10 years ago, in fact, did a documentary called Spit and Anger. And it was
Mhm.
about recognizing the anger of Black men and boys coming from father absent homes. And one of the people that I interviewed was Ayala Van Zant. Went to New
Oh, I know.
Orleans for Essence Festival, and she invited me to a beauty salon that one of her friends owned out in the Ninth Ward. And we went out and just hung out for like a couple of hours, ate food and laughed and joked. And then I interviewed her. But when I was interviewing her, one of the things that she said to me was, one of your challenges in the work that you do is going to be to create an acceptable language for men to express their vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I wondered,
Yeah.
I think about that all the time, that
Hmm.
one of the biggest
Hmm.
problems is, what language am I going to use to express my vulnerability and not be perceived as weak?
Yes, yes, yes. And it's so important. Iyanla picked The Invisible Ache as her 2024 book pick. So she was gracious and kind and picked the book and then did a 6-week series on using the invisible ache that was just for Black men. And one of the things I did the event for the group the last night that it was closing out. One of the things we talked about is, if language has been taken from us,
Mm,
then how do I reclaim or claim for the first time what was never given to me? And so I think even articulating what you're saying, which is, how do I talk about vulnerability as a superpower if vulnerability has been pathologized, really? It is weakness. And so there is a retraining, of our brains that happens over time. How do you eat an elephant? One
mhm.
small bite at a time. And so this is what
Right.
I say to, yeah, to Black men. This isn't about doing an extreme makeover. This is eating that elephant one small bite at a time. There's a
Mhm.
story in the New Testament about a shipwreck that happened. And it says that some of the people could swim and they got to shore, back to shore safely because they could swim. But it says that other people got back to shore on the broken pieces of the ship. And so I just want to remind Black boys and men and the women who love them and the people who love them that it is our brokenness that sometimes is our flotation device. It's the life jacket. And so the thing I
Mm,
thought I needed to hide or throw away or lie about, if I begin to understand that it is that piece of vulnerability that may be the exact thing that becomes my life vest to call me back
mm,
into the life that is worthy of me to live.
mm. We have a progressive model at Fathers Incorporated in our curriculum for our men. And that is, if I can impact how you feel, I can impact how you think. If I can impact how you think, I can impact what you do. But I can never
Mhm.
change your behavior until I show interest in how you're thinking and concern and empathy for how you're feeling. The biggest problem with men is we never ask them how they're feeling. And when we do ask them, we're not as serious about that. We're more concerned with what they're doing,
Absolutely.
less concerned with how they're thinking, and even less concerned with how they're feeling. Is that an accurate thought?
It is so true. Yes. I mean, it is so true. And, one of the things that Courtney and I talk about in The Invisible Ache is just what you're saying, to have genuine interest. That's why the invisibility, when I said that it's soul murder, because if I don't see you, and seeing you
Mm.
means if there is sadness in your eyes, but I just look right past it. If there is hardship or you're worried about work and I just keep moving as if I don't see you, it is so painful. And so, what I would also, when you're saying, where do we start? It is also not only to ask men, how do they feel? Because sometimes when we ask a man that and he doesn't know, or he gives that superficial answer,
Mhm.
and then he's criticized
Right.
for not knowing, or he's criticized for giving the party line. I would also say if we could be patient and give men space to discover how they feel, to safely explore their inner worlds. And so to not judge them or criticize them, like I asked you how you felt and you didn't answer. Well, if I was that
Right.
man, that certainly would not make me want to open my heart. And so I'm also inviting all of us to slow down, to watch our tone,
Mm.
to be tender in and patient, and sometimes just close your mouth and stop talking
Mm.
and give him room at his pace to eat that elephant one small bite at a time. This is about not him keeping up with your pace, but finding his own.
Mm. I'm on this kick down. My last 3 or 4 keynotes I've done and probably will continue for some time. It's been titled Empathy as a Core Responsibility to Providing Fatherhood Services. That if
Mm,
you don't have a
beautiful.
level of empathy for men and fathers, that is going to be extremely difficult for you to provide services to men. The other thing I wanted to, as we round out the end of this conversation, I also had the pleasure of being honored by Oprah 2 years ago on a show that she did called Honoring Our Kings. And right before the show, her and I,
I remember
and
that.
yeah, I was on that, and we talked a little bit before and after the interview. Because one of the things I had never heard her do was share her daddy's story. I never knew her daddy's story, and she shared her daddy's story on that event. And I was so,
Yes.
my heart just like
Yes.
melted to hear her talk about him. But afterwards, she sent me a book with a beautiful note in it after it was all over with. And the book was something that she had just finished co writing some time ago. And the title of the book was What Happened to You? And it's a question that I
Hmm.
always keep in my mind and wanted to ask you as it relates particularly to Black men. How far back do we have to go to really understand what happened to us to get to what ails us currently? Because people want to dismiss our recent history, but they want to dismiss even more our historical history. And a lot
Yes.
of this
Yeah.
behavior that we're talking about is rooted in what has happened to us as a people, Black people, but more specifically, since we're talking about men, Black fathers,
Absolutely.
in our historical history. How far do we have to go back to heal?
Well, it's we can't heal something. I said, you can't fix what you can't face, and you can't face what you can't feel. And so when we are trying to put in context what makes it hard for certain Black men to commit or to be fathers in a way that would make them feel good and also nurture their children. If we think about how Black men were separated systematically, separated from their families, and I'm talking about when, being enslaved. And so if we don't understand that we were programmed to leave. We were programmed to abandon, but we were programmed to abandon because we were abandoned. And I'm talking about not our, not the last generation, but as you're saying, from a systemic perspective, we need to understand what we're fighting, because it is not just the father who wasn't there or the mother who was critical or the grandmother or grandfather. We are talking about a system of racism that was set up to murder the soul, to wipe out your sense of dignity and worthiness. And so if we can understand that, this isn't about, and I hear people say all the time, well, like, I'm grown now. Why do I need to look at what happened, whether it's, with my parents or grandparents or systemically around societal oppression? Well, I ask people, how did you learn to speak your native language? If your native language is English or it's French or it's Swahili, how did you learn it? You learned it because it was given to you with repetition again and again and again. And so for us to dismantle what is harming Black boys and men, and particularly Black men in terms of fathering, being daddies, the daddies they really would want to be, there has to be a compassionate understanding about what it is that they are really fighting against. So we have to go back generations to understand where was I abandoned, what was stolen from me, that I'm now being judged, that I'm not good at doing. And I'm not good at doing it because I don't understand actually what was taken, stolen, robbed from, a whole people. And if we don't get that, we're putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound that actually needs to be treated. It needs surgery. The wound needs to be cleaned out and cared for so that real healing, real restoration, and real elevation to the place where Black men and Black fathers belong, that they can take their rightful seat.
Wow. The book is called The Invisible Ache, Black Men Identifying Their Pain and Reclaiming Their Power, co-written by Dr. Robin L. Smith and Courtney B. Vance. And you can find it all kinds of places and every place, including Audible, which is my favorite place. And I love the Audible. The fact that the two of you read it was even more inspiring to me. I love when authors read their own work. It was good to hear that. And so we encourage everyone to go out and grab the book. We will, as an organization, figure out how to include the book in our work and possibly even create some modules or something to have this deeper conversation. And then I'll probably be reaching out to you to talk to many of the dads that are in our space.
I was going to say the dads, the women who love the dads, the women who may not love the dads, but you share a child. So this is not just about loving the dad. This is about wanting to be healthy people. But you can go to my website, drrobinsmith.com. There's a sister website, theinvisibleache.com, that even has like a little work sheet on there. So there are ways to stay connected. And I honor you. Thank you so much for this time together. It was very special.
Thank you so much. And to my I Am Dad podcast listeners, you know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor used to always say to me, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice. Until next Sunday, God bless.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad Podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.